Welcome to Sales Accelerators, Winning Strategies for Financial Professionals, an educational webinar series that explores the latest tools and concepts to help boost your sales performance and drive business growth. Join us as we analyze trending topics in life insurance, investigate the latest headlines, and discuss solutions to accommodate your clients' unique needs. Please welcome your host, Kurt Fasen, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kurt Fasen, Executive Vice President here at DBS. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Sales Accelerators, the show where we are helping you to have practical insights that you can put to work immediately. Today we're going to dive into the topic of longevity. How prepared are adults in the United States really for living longer, healthier, and truly more fulfilling lives? And we want to take a look at how the latest data is helping to guide the planning conversations that each and every one of you are having with your clients. So today I've invited Matthew Gibson, our partner from John Hancock. He leads the Longevity and Behavioral Insurance Enablement Division for John Hancock in the United States. Matt, I'm so glad you're with us today.
Thanks, Kurt. Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Hey, okay. Now, folks, if you've joined us before, you know this, but for those of you who are new, or just a reminder for those of you who have visited with us in the past, I want you to take out your webinar action plan. If you can't find it, take out a sheet of paper. And this is what I want you to do. As Matt and I are having our conversation today, the hope is that this will bring some clients to mind, perhaps spark an idea. Take a moment and write that down. And after the session, I want you to take a few minutes, look back at your notes, and identify where you can put some of your learnings into practice right away. And of course, we have the DBS team standing by, ready to help you at any moment. All right, let's get started. So John Hancock has spent a great deal of time studying longevity preparedness and has released a benchmark that can really help advisors better understand just what your clients might be facing as they get older. So Matt, I think where I want to start is with an overview. Just what is a longevity preparedness index? That's kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I think it's important, Kurt, right, to anchor it, right? It's nothing really more than really a very simple framework that has been established to evaluate the readiness across 8 unique and specific domains of life and how U.S. adults are navigating those realities and really what extended lifespans are. We all know that we're living longer. So what does that actually mean? And it shows where we're falling short and where there may be opportunities for us to prepare better. So for years, I think we all might be thinking about this, like we've always just focused on financial security. And make no mistake, the conversation that you and I are having today is not saying the financial component of living longer isn't important. It absolutely is critical. But right. Living longer, healthier, better lives takes more than just money. I like to look at the financial part, money, I like thinking of it as the gasoline you need to get where you're going. Mm-hmm. And what we've done with the LPI, so Longevity Preparedness Index, if you want to shorten it, just LPI, that's what we've done as well. It's something that we've developed with the MIT Age Lab. And the LPI itself really offers a broader view. And we looked to MIT, just coincidentally, they happen to be just across the river from us here in Boston. It's measuring how U.S. adults are prepared to thrive in older ages across 8 unique domains. So those are social connection, finance, daily activities, care, home, community, health, and life transitions. And we can spend a little bit of time going into those a little bit more specifically, but it's designed to be quite holistic across a broad array of those domains.
That's fascinating. And I suppose as I think about it, back in the days when I was an advisor, if you hear something like this is all good information, but why does longevity matter? And why does an advisor need to understand this?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, before I think we get into it, I think one of the key components is to recognize what's just happened with life expectancy over the years, right? We've just in the last 100 years, we've had material changes in life expectancy, and we are living longer, and it is jumping out. The number of people over the age of 60 are expected to double in the next 3 decades to being a population of over 2.1 billion. So we're talking a huge number of people. So we should be thinking about longevity and understanding why it matters really as a rally cry to every single one of the financial professionals that are listening to this today, and really trying to reimagine what aging is and looks like, and think of it as an opportunity to encourage the clients in which that you serve to take the right steps and take action towards really owning their futures. So at John Hancock, our goal here is designed to expand the conversation, really leaning into a much more holistic perspective on what planning could look like and what can we do in the financial services industry to really partner with clients and customers to help them live longer, healthier, better lives. So it's really designed to spark this movement or act as a catalyst of change across not just our industry, but all industries, thinking about really thoughtful action, collaboration, and really ultimately a better prepared population of people that are aging, right? So this obviously aligns with our goals and initiatives at John Hancock. We're taking a broader view into what we're doing in terms of finances and how we build our insurance protection solutions and strategies, how we bring our life insurance products to life, what we're doing in the longevity space when it comes to things like John Hancock Vitality that's tied to our life products. It's really core to leaning in to why longevity truly matters.
That's very helpful. And, that does make a lot of sense. It's definitely something that can help provide a broader picture when individuals are working with their clients and they're planning. All right, I want to go back to something you mentioned, the way data is measured by looking at, I think you called them 8 essential domains of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we should do is maybe you could talk a little bit more about those in some detail.
Sure. Yeah. So not that any one of them is more important than the other. So I'll just go through them kind of alphabetically for any reason, right? So care would be the first. And I think this one is much more obvious to everyone here. We all understand the impact long-term care can have on a client, their family, and their finances. So understanding what care is in the longevity component can really open the door to conversations about care preferences, what that might mean to family burden, financial preparedness for care itself. Community would be the next one. I think this is a really interesting one because it connects the concept of housing, transportation, and social support. Like, do you see yourself staying in the community in which you live long term? And does it have the people and the support that you want when you age? Daily activities, that's something where it actually might identify early warning signs that could actually impact the cost of living longer. So what everyday tasks feel easy now, and which ones might become harder over time, and how would you want help if that were to change? Finance is one that everyone here is very familiar with. I think thinking about it through the lens of, okay, well, if you live to 95 or 100, how confident are you as a client that the income plan that you have in place would support you all the way through? So that would obviously naturally lead to conversations about income durability and longevity risk and the management of that risk. Health, that one's interesting. I think it's where I would talk to a client about the health domain is, how would you see your health changing over the next 10 to 20 years? And how might that impact your lifestyle or work if you're still working? How can I, as your financial planner, work with you to support this? This can kind of connect the concept of wellness and chronic conditions and the financial implications of health at a deeper level. Home is an interesting one. Where you live and how your home is structured is one of the biggest long-term planning drivers that can exist in there. Is your current home someplace that you're going to be able to live or want to live comfortably long term, or do you envision needing something different? Unfortunately, I'm a little bit of the cobbler with no shoes in that situation. My father-in-law passed earlier last year, and they had a lot of challenges because they had two homes. One home was a townhouse near where my sister-in-law lived. The other was very rural, off the coast of Maine on an island, and he was navigating a really complicated cancer situation. Wow. And unfortunately, the home in which the island is the most accessible from like a single floor living, but not the best place to be navigating being sick in a very rural area. The townhouse near my sister-in-law, where they spent the winters, only had a bathroom on the second floor. So that was a challenge unto itself. So that was a really important financial driver to my mother and father-in-law, but that's a kind of key component there. Life transitions is an interesting one that invites a conversation around planning or uncertainty and flexibility. So like, what shifts do you anticipate happening? Retirement is a shift. Becoming a caregiver is a shift. Receiving care yourself is a shift in life transition. So being able to have that conversation as a financial planner around the flexibility and uncertainty is really, really important. And the social connection one, I think that one, social health is deeply tied to longevity and independence and mental well-being. I think the way to think about it is, who are the people you rely on most today, and how would you stay connected as life inevitably changes, right? So I think when we think about these 8 domains and concepts and think about how we can bring those into conversations that you expect to have with a client and that they expect to have with you, clients gain clarity. And it actually can provide you an opportunity to uncover kind of hidden financial protection and planning needs that otherwise probably wouldn't have surfaced.
Yeah, it's just fascinating when you think about all those 8 different dimensions. It really covers a very broad spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I think about is, all right, that's interesting, but how about the U.S.? How about the people in the United States, the adults in the United States? How are they doing on the roadmap of living longer, better lives? I assume you have some findings from your study that reflects on that.
Yeah, so the study itself takes those 8 domains and scores them on a score from 0 to 100. It's very MIT of them, right? We're gonna go back to school and give ourselves grades again, right? So on the average, the American population received a 60. I grew up with 2 public school teachers as parents, so a D-, a 60 was certainly not acceptable. Actually, B- in my household wasn't acceptable growing up as a child. But a 60, that's a failing grade. So this indicates to us that overall, the U.S. population is underprepared for living longer. But what was really interesting is how you can then dial it down into the results. To each of those 8 domains received their own level of score. So what we really kind of surfaced in were there was 3 main areas: care, home, and health, that were far and away the weakest domains to consider and look at.
Now, were you surprised by any of the results that you found?
Yeah, so one of the great things of working with MIT, obviously as an academic institution, they're very data forward, and they cut and looked at it a lot of different ways. So we were able to look at the results and see that the preparedness varies differently by age, gender, and geography. So a few of the things that really kind of like jumped out, and I think may or may not be a surprise to everyone here, but women and people who are caregivers, again, tends to over-index, women, led the way. Younger adult populations showed much lower engagement and preparedness, but where women scored higher were in areas like care, social connection, daily activities, and life transactions. Now, these are domains that might be a little less obvious in the planning discussions, and I think I kind of alluded to opportunities as to why those are important in your previous question. Yeah. But they're critical for making sure that we're prepared correctly. Now, men, on the other hand, scored a bit higher in finance, but women showed strength in really a lot of key areas for long-term well-being. Some of the more suburban communities have more stronger support systems than urban or rural areas. So giving certain residents a preparedness kind of edge. The way I kind of look at it is I live in Boston. I have access to a great public transit system. So if I have now reached a point in my life as an aging adult where I'm no longer able to drive myself, I still can navigate to some of the best medical options here in the country, which are available to me through both that kind of public transit option or even something as simple as Uber. But if I'm living out in the middle of nowhere, what options do I have if I'm no longer able to travel on my own and accessing healthcare? So there's that interesting kind of component that kind of surfaced into there.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we start looking at those findings, it really kind of puts us in perspective. Now, one thing I want to take a closer look at is, I think you said earlier that the U.S. consumers did not score very well in that area of care. Actually, I think you said it was the lowest, and then that gives us obviously the greatest opportunity for improvement. My parents were teachers as well, so I was always looking for areas of improvement. So just talk about that area just a little bit. What more did you find there?
Yeah, so I think just a level set, care is where we were least prepared. You're spot on. We had only a score of 42, so it was far and away our weakest. And what's interesting is that we found that less than half of the participants in the study had taken any action whatsoever to make sure that they would have access to even something as simple as a long-term caregiver if they happen to need one. So I think it's really important to understand. We all know, roughly 70% of us are going to require some level of continuing care during our lives. And we saw that really kind of surface. And I think the thing that's really interesting is that the lower actions, like even it's something simple things that were in place, only about a quarter of folks have even a legal power of attorney for healthcare and finances in place. 16% of people had even had the conversation for CARES aids. And as I alluded to before, when Dave, my father-in-law, was getting sicker and sicker in the last couple of months of his life, we were having those conversations as a family of, well, how do we want to handle this? What does this mean? Are we going to do in-home hospice? Is he better equipped actually in a full-time facility for care? And the question of well, what does Dave want? And his answer was whatever Sally thinks is best, his wife, my mother-in-law. And because those conversations weren't surfaced, it was a very difficult period of time, beyond the difficult, obvious nature of losing a family member and having someone help decline. It's those little simple things. And I don't want to suggest that the areas of the LPI are, you have to do these Herculean efforts. It's just thinking about and having those conversations. It's what the LPI is designed to do is to bring new conversations to the forefront. So something like care, it's having a conversation with your family about what care might look like, putting plans in place for what receiving care might look like, or even something as simple as who would you rely on for care should you need it. You don't want, the two siblings having an argument over, well, where about this? Where is dad going to be? Where's mom going to be? Putting your advanced care directives in place and statements of what your end of life should look like. And yeah, of course, have conversations about what does my long-term care planning look like. So I think for everyone who's in this place here, you can provide obviously the right guidance and recommendations to what it might be from a financial solution perspective to address the care domain specifically. But where you can really provide value is underscoring the larger narrative that family needs to have. Yes, we're doing a long-term care rider, we're doing a hybrid solution, maybe we're self-insuring over here, whatever it ends up being, the instrument itself to support this isn't necessarily relevant to what you and I are here to talk about today, Kurt. It's that you're having those conversations, but that you then, with the LPI, you can pull out additional insights to what else does this family need. And because of that elevated conversation, you've now really changed the paradigm to that almost transactional relationship you've had with, between Kurt, let's pretend you're my advisor. You're just selling me a product or solution. I sign the receipt, we're good to go. But if you're forcing me to think about what this plan might be, the relationship we've had has now materially changed. I'm going to look to you for likely other things, and likely my children or other people that I know are like, oh, you know what, Kurt, help me and my family out. Like, so there's different ways to bring it to life.
I was just going to say that it really moves you as an advisor from someone who is selling a solution to someone who is providing more holistic planning, which I think is what everybody joining us on this call is striving towards. You want to have that deeper relationship. Yes, we're going to have to deal with the long-term care, but let's have a broader conversation, as you just said, about care. There were two more that I wrote down that I think did not get the passing grades. You'll tell us, but it was, I think, home and health. Those categories. Talk a little bit about what you learned in those two areas.
Yeah, so I keep on using my father-in-law as an example here, but it's relevant and it's recent for me, so it's just very top of mind. You know, home, we only scored a 56 out of 100 here, and it's, am I in a home that's suitable for aging? What does that mean? What does that look like? You know, what does that think about? You know, is the home option, is it aging in place? Do I need to upsize or downsize? Am I potentially living with my adult children? My brother has his mother and father-in-law in the in-law apartment where they're at, and that's the right solution for them. Candidly, it's not the right solution for me. Love my mother-in-law, but don't want that. But again, it's the conversations that need to have. You know, am I in a independent living facility, nursing homes? Am I in a retirement community? What does that look like? While we all think like, yes, I want to age in place, that sounds very appealing to most people. But the reality is depending on your situation, alternative housing options might actually be a better fit for a highest quality of life. So, the adage of accessibility starts at home. It's like, do I need the right entryways, or am I able to get up the stairs, or even something as simple as, do I have reliable internet in my neighborhood or my house to be able to access the ability to communicate outside of there? One of the things that a lot of services will do is help with decluttering, right? Like, am I potentially going to trip over all of the stuff I have just like in my house? There's a lot of different things to kind of think about. When we think about health, we did a little bit better in health, but we're still only in a 56 out of 100 there. We all know it's important. Like, we spend an incredible amount of money on health and wellness as a society. In the U.S., it's roughly about 7% of the U.S. GDP that we spend on health and well-being. So it's a non-trivial amount of that. So when we think about taking control and taking charge of our health, when it comes to the larger longevity, I think we all understand that I need to be healthy to live a long time, but do I have access to fitness options? And it doesn't have to be like, do I have access to a high-end gym, but do I have outdoor space to be able to go for a walk or whatnot? What about situations when you think about the COVID years where you literally were isolated? Do I have a lot of stress? Do I have solutions to be able to bring that to life? What about like cognitive, stimulations, a big challenge as you age. So there's a lot of pieces of health that are there. Obviously, I'd be remiss, within the John Hancock world, that's part of the reason why we have Vitality integrated into our life insurance solutions, is to really elevate that health narrative to folks. So it's really trying to help people live longer, healthier, better lives, and understanding what that means to the other domains.
So I think that first of all, kudos to John Hancock for putting this at the forefront and investing some real true resources in supporting this area. But I think what I want to do now, those were kind of the naughty kids in the class. Let's just go through some of the others. So some of the others that I remember you mentioned, daily activities, life transition, finance. Maybe we could just focus on those next. And how did these items turn out? And what can you elaborate for us on those areas?
Yeah, so daily activities and life transitions essentially have the same score, 60 and 61. And I'll get to finance, which did a little bit better at 64. But with daily activities, it's simply how you use time later in life. And I'm sure a lot of folks ask their clients, oh, what do you want to do in retirement? And you get the same answer. Oh, I want to travel. I'm going to go visit the grandkids, or I'm going to play a lot of golf. There's only so much travel and golf you can do before you kind of do it. It's like, what does the rest of it look like, right? Like many people, so much of their life, myself included, and Kurt, I imagine you as well, so much of your life is work and your career. But well, now that you've retired, what does that mean? What does that look like? The thing that's really interesting is we want to make sure that we're doing things that are intellectually challenging to ourselves, right? Like, what does that look like? Where are my hobbies getting into play? What are the tasks that keep me structured? Is there anything within my community that keeps me involved? Is there cultural activity? Fortunately, again, like I'll use where you live drives so much of this. Dr. Coughlin from MIT uses the situation of the single biggest indicator of how well you do in living longer in later life. There's one number that indicates your success in that, and it's your zip code. Because what do you have access to? Do you have access to healthcare? Do you have access to transit? Do you have access to culture and outdoor space and what fills your day-to-day activities? Do you have things that are keeping you physically active? There's so much that get into it. So like the daily activities that you do beyond just like routine self-care are a big part of it. It's like, are you being physically active? Are you being mentally active? What does that come into play? Within that. And so I think if we think about the life transitions that one's interesting. It's like we have a lot of change. Like humans, we actually do well with change. We adapt pretty well, but that gets more complicated as we get older, right? So like, there's a lot of like key life transitions that happen traditionally later in life. Retirement is one of them, right? That's a big change. You're not going to work every day. We talked about it right before, or do I relocate? Oh, I'm going to move to Florida. Okay, that sounds great because we've had so much snow here in Boston the last couple of months. That sounds great, but do I know anyone there? Do I have any family there? Do I have a network of people there? That's a big change. Right. What happens if I become a caregiver? That's a huge change. I'm now prioritizing somebody else's health, potentially oftentimes at the sacrifice of my own to do that. What happens if I start becoming a care recipient? So it's sometimes just surfacing these questions and just facing the light a little bit. So it's having a financial plan to help those transitions, particularly retirement, particularly that relocating one. Do I have the opportunity to talk to experts like the folks that might be listening to this to really kind of uncover those unknowns of retirement? And really sometimes it's just asking yourself, knowing yourself and asking yourself, what do I want? Like, yeah, I want to make sure I have my personal autonomy. That's critical. I don't want to rely on everybody else. But that is an ongoing effort. And it's more and more important as you get older and as more of these transitions happen. So how you handle these micro moments, if you will, are really important. And they can shape your ability to find, purpose and happiness and meaning in your relationships that you have. So it's those life transitions are really key. And then the last one, finance, which I think, again, everyone here I would hope, is probably intimately familiar with. 64. But the thing that's really interesting about this is a lot of people just don't currently work with an advisor. So think of all the people that you work with currently. That's great. Like they are likely actually better. They actually are more likely to have a higher LPI score just by virtue of working with an advisor themselves. But understanding your financial stability is really important. I use the gasoline example. Money drives fuels the machine of living longer. So understanding what that means. And I think so much of longevity planning versus longevity preparedness, there's a nuance there we can talk about as well. It's essential, right? We understand that. But we've always kind of approached living longer of, boy, I need to make sure I have enough money to live a long time. That's kind of it we've always done. It's important, right? It's, financial professionals really help clients do more than just wealth management, right? You're able to focus broader on longevity planning, like because of that, right? as I said before, roughly about 2/3 of people have talked to their financial planner, has talked to them beyond just the transaction of the insurance solution that they're talking about. It's like, well, what does that mean? What about health? What about social engagement? What about housing opportunities? You're a catalyst to the other 7 domains because you're there talking about finance. They trust you with the fuel to run the machine. So you're able to surface those other gaps and help actually address a lot of those.
Yeah, that's that's the critical piece, right? That I believe that all of you that are joining us, either on the podcast or the webcast, with us today, that's probably the lead that many of you have. But as we've said throughout, it's this whole spectrum of items throughout all 8 different areas that can really help provide that holistic plan and the holistic conversation, and really a deeper, more meaningful, and bringing true value to your clients. All right. I think I kept track of these correctly. I think we only have 2 left.
Correct.
Social connection and community. And I can tell you my own experience with my parents is I watched them. These were critical for them as they transitioned into their next, into where they spent their later years. So talk about what you've learned in these 2 areas.
Yeah, so we score a little bit better here. Social connection, we're at 69, so we're almost at a C, if you want to look at it that way. But we scored relatively high comparatively. And make no mistake, no one's expecting to get 100 in any one of these categories. But so we did score relatively high at a 69. But being prepared with social connection is things like maintaining the connection that you have with your family, your friends, the community in which you live. And that's feeds into your physical and mental well-being in a number of different ways. So, you likely, engage with your spouse, or I would hope you regularly engage with your spouse or whoever you might live with. But one of you is likely going to outlive the other. So it's important to understand that you stay in touch with, adult children and friends and the community or the church that you're a part of. People are far more likely to interact digitally nowadays, right? Like I keep on talking to my mother, and she talks about, I got into an argument with your aunt on Facebook, and I was like, okay, thanks, Mom. Like, we're likely to interact digitally, and a significant portion of that is it's not the best social connection. And many people, we found actually with the survey, they're only connected with their family sometimes digitally as well. Like it's only their text group with their family, perhaps, right? So building connections outside of your family is really important. I have a neighbor, and since we're filming this from my home, I literally can see diagonally through the bay window here to my neighbor's house across the street. There's a older woman, Vera. She's in her early 90s. She lives alone, and I always make it a point to actually keep my holiday lights on my house up longer than I personally would prefer, because she sent me a text saying that she likes seeing them, and it's an interesting kind of social moment between her and I. And this year they stayed up a lot longer than normal would, because I had no place to put the ladder to get in the house because we had snowbanks everywhere. So they actually came down this past weekend, and I fired her a note, and we had a little bit of a banter, and I saw her out in her driveway the other day, so we had a brief conversation. But again, those social connection points are interesting. One of the things with the LPI, we found only 1 in 5 people said that they can't depend on anyone else in their area besides in their family, and only 1 in 4 says they're close to anyone in their area besides their family. So having those opportunities to stay connected are critical. So it's community groups, or a church or religious organizations that you're a part of, or being involved in some sort of philanthropy or charitable or volunteer organizations, or if you live in a city, being a part of a garden club of an area. So we have a large community garden about a quarter mile around the corner. And I'll walk my dog past there, and there's always people just out and about and talking. So there's different ways to bring that about, because that social connectivity. And I think we all worry about, so my mother-in-law, she's now a widow, and she lives by herself. So staying connected is really important. So, my husband has a video call with her because they're, probably about 4 hours by car away every Sunday. And my sister-in-law has dinner with her every Thursday night. So there's always that connection. But she's like, oh, my next door neighbor and we go for a walk every other day together. So it's like good. Like she has those social moments, and I feel a little bit better about it because I understand now, because I've been working so closely with MIT and a lot of this work to understand those strengths and really seeing those kind of come to life. But when you go into the community section of the LPI, that one is also, I think, really important too. It's the neighborhood in which you live in. I think a lot of the social connection in the community really play off of each other. That one we scored a 70, so it's our highest, which is great. But the community in which you live in is really important. Like, is the community you live, is it safe? So fortunately, the survey respondents showed about 3/4 of people felt that their community was safe. Unfortunately, on the other end, 39% found that their community has resources for older adults. 35% said that they have good public transportation. So I talked about, I'm fortunate enough to live here in the city. I'm about a 3-minute walk at a healthy male adult pace to the subway. Might be a 5 or maybe 10-minute walk for somebody who has some mobility challenges potentially. But I have access to public transit that gets me to, I can get to a grocery store, I can get to a pharmacy, I can get to a hospital, and routine medical care access to things like that as well. So the neighborhood in which you live in, I talked about it earlier, your zip code is potentially the biggest driver of understanding how well you're going to live. Do you have access to high-speed internet? What about climate factors? Is it a safe environment to live in? From a climate perspective, you don't necessarily want to be living on your own in your early to maybe mid or even late 90s or 100 in an area where you might have to be evacuated because of a hurricane or a flood or, God forbid, a forest fire or situations like that. So that's a challenge for a lot of people. Is it affordable? The finance domain we talked about before, again, it's the fuel, but is it an affordable environment to live in? And then there's that whole other thing, the concept of a thing called third places, right? We all have 3 places. It's our home, it's our work, and it's our third place. Like for me, it's the gym. Like I'm a bit of a gym rat. The gym is my third place. Someone else, it might be as they age, maybe it's their church. Maybe it's something as simple as the cafe around the corner where you have your coffee and you meet up with everybody else that you talk with. Like, so it's very much a Boston boy in me. The Dunkin' Donuts, about a 3-minute walk from my house, and I go there, grab my iced coffee in the morning. Yes, I get iced coffee in the winter. And there'll be a little cohort of like probably about 8 to 10, I would say, gentlemen probably in their early 80s. They're all very Bostonian. Like you walk in there and it's almost like a comical situation to see, but they're all there having their moment. And again, that's their community. So what does that look like? And the thing that surfaces with the community domain that is, I think, something we shouldn't dismiss is that 90% of the respondents agreed that the community in which they live plays a huge role in how well they live in their older ages. Right. So it's important to bring it together for sure. And I do feel a little bit better that it is our strongest scoring domain.
Well, I love that, because what it really does is it provides us almost like a tapestry of all of the different elements that go into really making up those 8 important domains in our life that will help us better understand the longevity and the happiness and the health that we're going to have as we age. But some of the call may be just wondering a bit, what can they do with this information? I assume you have some suggestions with that.
Yeah, so I think, please review the Longevity Preparedness Index document at large. It goes into each of the 8 domains and actually even goes so far as actually creating a checklist potentially to have a conversation with clients. But each domain has data that has clearly, and I talked about some of it already, consumers need to work with a financial professional to be better prepared. Mm-hmm. Again, you are the catalyst for change. So I'm not going to go through all the domains again, but one of the things many U.S. adults haven't planned for future care needs. I keep going back to the care domain because it was our biggest gap. They haven't also adapted their homes potentially for aging. This really can impact their ability to stay and maintain their independence and their quality of life. So a conversation to think about is, how can you, as a financial professional, explore the conversations with your clients about long-term care options and potentially budgeting for home modifications or moving. People in the space, you can instruct your clients and guide them to review these things and have conversations about care preferences and understanding their accessibility. We know that financial planning is a key driver to stronger overall preparedness. It's factual, we've seen it, the data supports it. But it's not the only one. Working with a financial professional boosts all the other domains, not just the finance domain. And if you can help your clients build a plan that is holistic in its approach and addresses things like healthcare and healthcare costs and what your lifestyle might look like and lifestyle expenses and what transitions might look like. And those are sometimes even something simple as using things like understanding what cost of care is. We obviously have a cost of care calculator at John Hancock that we use and suggest, and it's a really great conversation starter to understand what those costs are and the reality of it, and layering in things like what that might look like in 5-10 years from now, and what longevity planning might look like to understand the needs there. And I do want to take this also opportunity, Kurt, to briefly talk about the nuance between longevity planning and longevity preparedness. A lot what you and I have talked about today has been talking about the whole concept of longevity preparedness. But many people on the call here are doing things like longevity planning. I like to look, the difference between planning and preparedness is planning is having the blueprint, whereas preparedness is having the bricks. So planning is having, those are the illustrations, the spreadsheets, the documents, the strategies. That's what life could look like, right? It's a potential outcome. Preparedness, on the other hand, is being ready to live it. That's the day-to-day decisions. Those are the habits and behaviors you have in place. Those are the hard conversations. Those are having the resources to do that. Both are critical. You need both the blueprints and the bricks to build the house. So only having one part of that conversation, this is what life could look like, and this is how we can be ready to execute on it. I think that's the piece that I would really suggest everyone on the call think about, how to surface those conversations.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into what I was thinking, which is, okay, we've got all this information. When in your study or in your experience, when's the right time to have these conversations?
The right time was yesterday. The next best right time is today, right? And that's much like everything, right? No, but joking aside, I think how you approach it is going to be different depending on the stage of life an individual is going to be. I'm 46. How I might have a conversation is going to be very different than my 77-year-old mother-in-law would, right? So, thinking about kind of just like very kind of broad categories, like young adults, so talking like under 40. That's where it's about establishing habits about health and finances and saving. People in my age demo, early 40s to mid to late 50s, that's about the other pillars of living longer. That's making sure I have the social connections. That's, finding the little things in life that bring me joy and making the right choices and plans about potential future care. Late 50s into 70s, that's really preparing and entering retirement. So that's your time to think about what maybe the second version of you looks like. You're so much of our life during our working years is defined by our job and our career. What happens when that's not the big part of your life? What does that look like? What does that mean for your home, your community, and the transitions that you have in there? And then later in life, you've made it. You're in the peak of your retirement, enjoying the fruits of your years and years of working. You've been planning for this your entire life, but don't stop. Like, okay, it's not the finish line. Retirement isn't the finish line anymore. It used to be, but it isn't anymore.
Yeah.
what does it actually look like from a preparedness, again, specifically in things like care, home, and life transitions, because we identify those as the biggest gaps. So I think that's the way I would look at it. And I don't want to be too myopic about it. It's not about, okay, Kurt, I'm not suggesting that every single one of the people listening to this are going to have a conversation about all 8 domains with every single one of their clients. No, that'd be foolish. It's the individual ones that you'll be able to surface and have the ones that are relevant to that particular customer. So I'm the one that might be most important for me is probably the care domain, because the care domain is important to me and my family because I just lived through the fallout from that with my family, right? And that's probably the case with many adults in my age demographic. We're going through it right now with our parents or even like our grandparents. So my mom's mom is still with us. She turns 100 in 4 days. Yeah. So longevity is a big thing in my family. So, but like it's different conversations for different people and what that means and looks like. So it's what is relevant to the client and what is relevant to your practice.
I think that's perfect. All right. I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to just have you talk for a moment about how John Hancock is uniquely positioned to champion this initiative. Can you talk about the approach that you take at John Hancock?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'll come at it kind of backwards, if you would, with me, Kurt. Just go on this journey with me. So what we're doing with the LPI is not just about, oh, look, here's a study, here's some data, that's really interesting. We're really kind of approaching it in 3 kind of main areas. The first one is, yes, here's the data, here's the insights. These are, meaningful data points and insights that can help people think about preparing better. The second component is using it as a prompt to the folks on this call to have a more holistic planning conversations with their clients about living better for longer. And then internally, we're using the LPI to inform our solutions. So what does that mean from the insights here that we should be thinking about how we can drive the solutions offering we're coming into play? So understanding that care was a big gap. That's part of the reason why we continue to lean in on things like our long-term care rider solution or our hybrid solution, Life Care. It's all about kind of bringing those 2 components to life. Obviously, with John Hancock Vitality, we have that uniquely put into our life insurance solutions that are designed to drive both health and other areas of the domains forward. But we don't stop there. We have a lot of time, effort, and energy into, and you've heard me say it a few times at this point, it's just kind of ingrained into my language. We really are committed to helping our customers live longer, healthier, and better lives. And you'll see that phrase throughout literally everything we do at John Hancock about longer, healthier, better lives for our customers. So we have the work that we've done, not only with working with MIT and the Age Lab and with what we've done with Vitality, we have earned a space at the table and have incredible resources available to everyone here that are just flat out available just at johnhancock.com through either the LPI. We also have a docu-series that is bringing more thought leadership stuff forward to the forefront with really some of the leading minds in the longevity space, from cancer research to sleep research to muscular health and what that means. And a gratuitous plug for the docu-series. The docu-series, you can watch it and you don't even realize it's a John Hancock thing until the credits roll at the end. It is really meant to be a thought leadership piece forward of how we might be thinking about what living longer means and looks like. And I think that if there's one thing I would challenge everyone to think about differently is what living longer can mean.
Right. I love that. I'm going to give you a moment, Matthew, just to catch your breath. Yeah, this has been a fantastic discussion. And I hope that each and every one of you picked up some nuggets. I know I did, of things you can take back to have conversations with your clients. In my mind, longevity planning really, really does open a deeper, more meaningful conversation and a chance that maybe you have clients that will truly benefit from really revisiting their longevity through the lens of the information you've learned today. Now, as you start uncovering opportunities, you're not by yourself. The resources that Matthew referred to are going to be made available to you. The DBS team, we're here to help. We have the expertise and the connection to the experts to be able to help you to be successful in your conversations. So whether you need help framing the discussion, identifying the right solution, or just navigating the next steps, whatever it is, we're here. Matthew, any final words for our audience today?
Yeah, I'd like to end on two things quickly. The first one is I'd like to ask everyone listening to just quickly imagine what it would be like all of a sudden to age to 100 and look around the room that you think you would be in. And many of us, unfortunately, just think of I'm in a long-term care facility and there's an oxygen tank or a wheelchair, really sad situation. But instead, I'd like everyone to think of a movie that was released about 3 years ago. It was called 80 for Brady. It's about these four women that decide they're going to go to the Super Bowl to watch Tom Brady and the Patriots play. It's a terrible movie, for the record. No, but it stars, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Rita Moreno, and Sally Field, and they go on this absolute crazy road trip. It's somewhere between The Golden Girls meets Bridesmaids meets The Hangover. But it fades to black, and it says inspired by a true story. You see a picture of these four women, and you have Betty, Anita, Claire, and Pat. And Pat in the upper left corner of that photo is my grandmother. So she, as I said before, she turns 100 in just a few days. But that's what aging can look like. It doesn't have to be going on a crazy road trip in backroom poker with Guy Fieri. It didn't actually happen for her. It's a little inspired by a true story, but it is true. But the component of it is living longer is different, and customer expectations are changing. It's not just about living longer and there being more older people on there. Their expectations are changing. And this is where you need to come up with new conversations and new approaches and new ways to reach people. It's not just about responding to a customer anymore, because anyone can respond to something, but not everyone can truly excite them and reach them with different conversations in a different meeting. And I think that's your point you were saying earlier, is that it's that holistic planning changes that paradigm and really brings it forward, because how customers expect and your clients expect things from now has materially changed.
Absolutely. Matthew, thank you again for joining us. And I want to thank each and every one of you out there for taking time out of your busy schedule once again for joining us for DBS's Sales Accelerators. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Until then, take care, be well, and stay safe, everybody.